I am on a journey to solo every boss in Ark, and Rockwell is next on my list. But I'm already questioning my life choices. Aberration is way worse than I remember. To make it harder, this is official. Oh, the game crashed and you lost 2 weeks of work because of it? Too bad. Deal with it. Loss is permanent. It's an extra layer of fear that makes you second guess everything you do. So, come watch Ark torture me instead so you can sit safely, free of the pain that is Ark official. Let's do this. I told myself that I wasn't going to do this again on officials, but there I was. I spawned in a location and, I just didn't really like it, so I wanted to start over. But apparently I'm immune to poison. Hey, maybe this won't be so bad after all. I started next to a Z plant, so I grabbed a couple of these seeds so that I could get ahead of that light pet game. Then I ran into an Equus, but I've honestly only ever tamed one of these things like once or twice ever. And I was pretty sure that you could use berries instead of carrots. But either you can't, or I'm just terrible at taming horses. Probably the latter. Either way, after 2 failed attempts, I gave up, because also I'm just way too impatient for this kind of thing. I moved on and I found a quiet and safe spot to put up some foundations. I started with thatch because they're pretty cheap. And on official, even though it is 2 times at the launch, everything always gets expensive, and I'm cheap as heck. This will be a temporary spot, so no need to waste time crafting wood or stone. I had a little audience watching me, well, this audience of 1. It was this little bulldog, so I used that Z seed that I got earlier, and I tamed him. It was just a level 10, but honestly, after a few levels in these, it'll last more than enough. I do not plan on living in the blue zone, at least not anytime soon. So having one that lasts like this long, it's probably going to be good enough. I got to work with the basics. It's always tough for me to get hide early on. It's really hard. It's because of those crappy weapons that don't do a lot of damage, and also trying to find weak enough dinos that I can actually take down without crafting 100 arrows. It's always frustrating, especially because the ones that you can take down give such little hide. But I did need it for my bed. I don't really know my way around this map that well, especially this green zone area. So if I die, it's gonna be a nightmare getting back to my tiny little base. So a bed is definitely a priority. Once I got that set up though, the next objective was the mortar and pestle. Something I also needed a lot of hide for. I wanted to get out to taming, so I needed those narcotics for those trank arrows. After a bit more resource gathering, it was time to do just that, taming. My first tame is almost always a parasaur. They're just so easy, and while they're not the best at berry gathering, they are so much better than doing it by hand. While waiting, I was gathering some resources when I ran into a Cosmo. At the time, all I knew about was chitin, is what you needed to tame them, so I equipped some, and I attempted to tame it. I got that first feeding in, but I was immediately attacked by a crab, and then right into some mushrooms. Awesome! This might actually be harder than I thought, especially if it only gives me less than 8% on each feeding. Ugh! It got hit or spooked or something and the taming meter started to drop. I decided I'd let that one go for now. If 8% is all I'm getting on 2 times, I was going to try and find a lower level. Save myself the frustration. But my parasaur finished, and once I saddled him, I got to farming some berries so that I could craft those narcotics. Then I spent the rest of the day running around looking for a lower level Cosmo and grabbing some resources. They are really freaking hard to see. I'm sure I ran past a few because I wasn't paying super close attention. And just as the day was ending, I got my forge set up and I started smelting that small bit of metal that I got from the river rocks so that I could get a smithy and then those metal tools. I had just enough metal for the pick since all you need is 1. But of course, that's the most important one, so I can go get more metal a lot easier. Which I did just that, right to the river to farm more river rocks. That 95 Cosmo was still just hanging around. I decided to give it another go. Once I got used to its little game, it was actually pretty easy. I just had to make sure there wasn't any other things in the area that would disrupt the process. Nothing really aggroes to him, so as long as I stay hidden, I should be able to do it. Even when I was right next to this attacking crab, I was able to get a thing in. But then I noticed the same thing was happening. Its taming was going down again. So annoying. I didn't know if it was because I was taking too long or because it got spooked or what. I learned later on what the problem was, but for now I had to give up and I left Cosmo less and really annoyed. There was a level 70 crab stuck in someone's trap that I noticed while farming metal. I assumed it was someone trying to tame it, but that thing was literally there for like 2 hours. So it was definitely, accidentally, stuck. And it had a baby. Yes, this was perfect. I've literally never tamed a crab before in Ark, and I did not want to spend the time learning how or crafting a trap. So I went back to get a metal pike because I have absolutely nothing else that could kill this thing. And I just went to town on it. And then I claimed the baby. But I had no cryopods. I was still gonna have to get this thing back to my base. Fortunately, it's really close. I don't have anything to protect it though, so if it does get attacked, I am screwed. I figured it would probably be a Spino to come along and just swipe it since they're everywhere, but nope. I couldn't even get the thing out of the water before stupid piranhas absolutely annihilated it. So much for having my first crab. Hooray! And then there was that stupid 95 Cosmo still there just staring at me and mocking at me, laughing in my face for getting my baby killed. I decided to give it one more go, and I really needed a win here. And even though it took longer than it needed because I used kite, I got it. It was my first Cosmo. Let's go. And as one does when they get their first Cosmo, you test him out. I was really feeling it, but I clearly needed practice. I didn't want to go and get it or myself killed right away, so I ended up holding off on the practice and I got back to work. I got a couple more Z seeds, then off to find more tames. I quickly realized how awesome the movement is with Cosmo, so I actually left my parasaur behind and I ran around on foot. I was able to secure myself a gas vein. On scorched earth, I was frustrated not being able to get oil, so I was glad to secure a spot here. And it wasn't very long before I already had my first loss on Aberration. I forgot to feed my Cosmo, sitting there on my shoulder with no feeding trough. The poor little guy starved to death. And after all that time spent trying to get him, rip, it was time to find a more permanent base location. I packed up my things on my parasaur and I set off to find a good spot. The location I was hoping to get was already built on, which is no surprise. It's a nice spot overlooking the whole map, so I don't know why I expected it to be open. There was a freaking rock drake up here though, a little concerning that it's this far up in the green zone. It was only a level 10. I thought I could take it. I had it super close to death, and I thought it just had one more hit, but instead, RIP my parasaur. But now I had all my stuff and no way to move it. I couldn't just put down a foundation either because I was too close to other tribes, so I had to dump some of the stuff and just carry what I could on foot. Not too far though, there was another parasaur. I knocked it out quickly, and then went after the Doedicurus right here since I had to wait for it anyways. While waiting, I just hung out nearby and grabbed some resources. Then I continued to wait for my Doedicurus as well, but that was going to take quite a bit longer, so it was back to searching for a new base spot. I ended up coming across this nice safe area by the charging station. It's secluded, it's near good resources, and most importantly, no one has claimed it yet. So I started claiming my land. I had to craft a Doedicurus saddle since I had no cryos yet. I would need to ride this guy back to my new base spot. So when he was done, I ran over to get him, and then I made my 1,000 meter journey home. And fortunately, I made it back with no deadly run-ins. Now that I had my berry farmer and stone farmer situated, the next one on the list is something to help me get high. I wasn't picky, just anything that could do some decent damage so that I don't have to keep crafting arrows. I found a solid Ravager, and I went after him. These I wanted to get for their carry weight, but even with this level 95, I could probably use it to get some hide. But the struggle was real. I got cocky and I thought that I could do it without a trap, but with so many dinos in the area, that just wasn't gonna happen. I found another one, this one just a level 10. I figured I could pump enough tranks into one this level with just one bola. That way I wouldn't need a trap. And I was getting impatient, so I just went for it. But my impatience screwed me over yet again because this level 80 had something to say about me taming his little buddy. first death. I ran back out with proper gear and enough tranks to try and get that level 80. But again, with no trap, a bear ate it. Yay! I was really hoping to get by without spending resources on crafting a trap, but it looks like that may have been a really dumb idea. Because when I found another Ravager, once again, I really struggled to tame it. But this time, a trap wouldn't do much good because it did not want to come out of the water. And then a piranha ate it. So the quest for a Ravager, or something to gather hide, continued. I roamed the Ark for quite some time until I finally came across a level 55. For this one, it should be weak enough that I can just tank the hit from my Parasaur. And once it was knocked out, I ran back to base to craft a saddle and gather more resources. These don't take that long, so I can just leave it for a while. I started bolstering my supply of goods and I gathered up those good resources until my Ravager was ready. When it was time to feed him, I hopped on my Parasaur and went to search for a Novus. They're pretty much all over in the green zone, so I didn't have to search very long. I got my mutton and I went to feed my Ravager. It was in a really dangerous spot. I had to be careful with getting it out of there since I didn't have any cryos yet. I don't know what I was thinking. Probably my impatience, once again destroying me, but I thought that I could get it to follow me past these enemies. But oh boy, I was wrong. I don't know why I thought that would work. I had a saddle for it crafted, I just forgot it at my base. I should have ridden the Ravager home, and I should have just left the Parasaur behind, honestly. Or, what I really should have done was just ran over here from my base and rode it home. But again, that was just gonna take too much time, so impatience. Once again, my greatest enemy so far. I came back for another round of Ravager hunting. Once again, I'm struggling to do this. Most simple of tasks. It's not a hard tame, but I cannot get one. For some reason, I almost lost my Parasaur once again, so I parked him off to the side while I tried to knock this guy out. But I could not get it down in time, again, with no trap. I really should have used a trap. I gave up for now and I headed home, but ran into a Sarco on the way. I was getting really annoyed and desperate for taming anything. So to feel good about myself, I knocked out this Sarco. With another low level 15 Ravager nearby, I figured I should be able to get this one. But nah, Ravagers are now the hardest dino in the game apparently to me. I died from a level 15 Ravager, and yes, I'm very embarrassed about it. Thankfully my Parasaur and Fred were still alive. I grabbed them and my stuff and I headed back to base to craft some armor. Getting flak on will hopefully make taming a Ravager possible for me without dying. I ended up spotting an Iguanodon. Getting around on the Parasaur is pretty much a pain, so hopefully this is an easy enough tame that I can use to help travel. I can't remember the last time I rode one of these, but this was a very wise choice. They can cruise, and I forgot all about their ability to have infinite stamina. So this is a much better traveler than the Parasaur, and I was very happy about it. My Sarco finished and I got it safely back to base, and I spent the rest of the day getting that hide to craft a saddle so that I could use my Sarco to get more hide. Alright, but another fatal error on my part. I knew I couldn't take these bears, so I was trying to peacefully pass them by. But I got stuck, and bears do not like when you hang around them for too long. Just as I knew it was going to happen, they trapped me in and they killed my Sarco. R.I.P. I had that thing for like 5 minutes. Once again, back to the struggle for hide. But instead of going right back out for another tame, since I was so annoyed, I did some resource gathering instead. Chopping down some trees down on the back of my Parasaur, and I smashed some stones with my Doedicurus. I was in need of getting my base set up a little bit more. There's always a paranoia in the back of my head, thinking someone is going to come along and pillar my base. So it's always a rush to get things set up, even on this temporary server, because trolls always be trolling. I found an otter in the river right in front of my base. This will be handy for when the time comes to get artifacts. They can hold multiple in their inventory, so instead of doing 2 cave runs, I could just grab the artifact twice while I'm in there. Because let's be honest, the probability of defeating Rockwell on the first go is super low, so it's always good to have backups. I got my otter tamed using the plethora of piranha in the water. It's not his favorite food, but it does the job. I was getting pretty desperate for that Ravager and really tired of being frustrated from trying to tame one. So I caved. I ended up building a trap, something I probably should have done from the beginning. It wasn't a very good trap either. None of those fancy or efficient traps. Nope, it's just a box. And I was totally okay with sacrificing my iguanodon because I was so annoyed at this point. And this Diplo was making my life so much worse. So I got it in there, sacrificed my iguanodon to try and trap the Ravager, barely escaping with my life from his buddies, and once I was finally safe, I got ready to go trinket, only to realize my trap really sucked. It was too short, because I forgot that these mofos can jump. So, another wasted effort. I was so frustrated and so annoyed. If all I do in 100 days is tame one Ravager at this point, it'll probably feel like a success. Losing my Sarco, losing my iguanodon, then wasting those resources on a trap, I am literally making negative progress. But such is Aberration. I pressed on with a new set of flak and bolas and arrows and walls and everything I needed this time. I found a level 25, got it in the trap, and I trained it. Finally! But I was here before. I still don't have Cryo, so I'm gonna have to get it home. I'll worry about that though when it's finished. Right nearby was a level 45 dire bear. It was perfect for me to tame something that I could use to actually fight things and get meat and hide. Once again, I relied on my no trap method. I tried running around the structure and using these giant crystals. Unlike the Ravager, the bear was much easier to put down. I got the mutton for my Ravager and I went to feed him. The bear finished as well. I left the Ravager in his box while I very cautiously walked the bear home. I didn't have nearly enough stuff to make a saddle. I was able to get the bear home safely, and then I crafted my Ravager saddle, and this time I ran to him and rode him home. I was not risking that follow garbage again. And finally, after like 10 plus hours, I had what should have been a day one tame. But now I can really make some progress. This guy was such a low level that I couldn't actually use him for getting hide or meat. But more importantly, these things are pack mules, and I needed metal. Farming river rocks just was not cutting it anymore. I needed a larger supply. So I rode my Ravager to the blue zone to start collecting some of that sweet, sweet metal, and some blue crystals too. But my inexperience on Aberration left me in a vulnerable position. I succumbed to the toxic plant life. I always knew about the red toxin mushrooms, but I honestly had no idea there were blue ones too. And these were worse because the effect was much longer. I forgot that I could use other mushrooms to counteract it, but in that moment, I was panicky and I died. I parked my Ravager somewhere safe so that I didn't lose this one too, and then I had to run my way all the way back from base once I respawned. But now that I know what those plants look like, hopefully it doesn't happen again. Hopefully. I spent a good amount of time getting my narcotics and trank arrows prepped for some taming. Then I set up my water supply so that I can get some crops going. I was finally able to gather enough hide to craft a dire bear saddle. This burned all the hide that I had left, but now that I have a bear, which is something with decent strength, I should be able to get hide more easily. So I went out and I farmed some of that. I forgot how amazing these things are at movement. I probably should have just tamed one of these right from the start. They're great for berries and fiber. They got awesome movement on them. They're really strong. All around, a really great tame. I feel like bears are definitely underrated. Next up was getting that fertilizer situation taken care of. But also I have no idea where to get oil. So a dung beetle was in order. I cruised down to the blue zone and I found one pretty much right away. Gave him some poop. And in just a few minutes I had myself infinite fertilizer and a really good supply of oil. But once again, still no cryos, so getting him home was a multi-trip thing. I left Fred behind, carried him home, and then went back for Fred. I got some more metal while I was down there, and then back at home, I planted my Z seeds. The Z fruit is what you need to tame the new Ying, and crops take a little bit of time to grow, so I got that set up so that I could be prepared to tame one when I run into one. I got my dung beetle in his box and a bunch of poopers nearby to start collecting. You gotta love how quickly these things produce fertilizer. I put down a couple crop plots and planted my Z seeds once I had the fert. The little bit of oil he produced was also just enough for a fabricator. I just needed to hop on my bear and find some chitin so that I could craft some more cementing paste for it. And then the first thing I crafted, since I had a ton of leftover organic poly from the crabs, was a shotgun, a couple of canteens, and a glider suit. Now that I had my Fabricator, I could start getting those electronic-based structures, but I needed a way to get electronics first. I am totally unfamiliar with where to get silica pearls on Aberration, but after some research, I learned I could get them in Fertile Lake. So I took Bear up there. Apparently they are located all along the southern shore, but some of that water is very deep. I had no oxygen tank, and Bear is not the best swimmer. I tried to get down there and see if I could find any, but they are just too hard to see. The Bear is way too slow in the water too, and with no oxygen tank, that seemed too deep for me to get. So ultimately it was a failed trip. Day 16, I went back to craft a scuba tank, and just as I was heading back up north, I spotted a decent Spino, a level 95. I was in serious need of something stronger, and a Spino would really help me level up and allow me to explore the blue zone more safely. I had to get this guy. I didn't have any resources for a trap, and I didn't want to lose it either, so I just went with my non-trap method. Surprise, surprise. Lucky for me, he was attacking this poor guy's tame, and it distracted him while I shot at it. I had to make a choice here. Kill this Spino and save this guy's stego? He's clearly AFK. Or knock it out. I honestly thought I could knock it out before he killed it, but whoops. Sorry, guy. I guess you should know better than to leave tames out while AFK. That is on you, buddy. I felt a little bad, but I really needed that Spino. These things wake up really quickly, so I pretty much babysat it, and I didn't go far. I had to craft some narcotics and get it meat, but other than that, I stuck nearby gathering resources until it was done. It was in an awkward spot. I thought it'd be mostly safe from something hit it, but I was disappointed to find out it had dropped its taming effectiveness. The only way that could have happened is if a wild dino hit it, but I was mostly out of render, so it would have had to be another survivor that was nearby. And sure enough, I found this person's bag right underneath, meaning they were killed right here while something was also hitting my Spino. There is no way this is a coincidence that this bag is just right here. This 100% was a troll, purposely injuring my tame. Welcome to official. Anyways, it's not like it was a 150 level ruined tame or anything like that, and it's still much stronger than anything I have, so I couldn't be too mad about it, because now I had a Spino. And it was right near my base, so I didn't have to go through that struggle of trying to get it home. Now I definitely needed pearls so that I could craft the Spino saddle. I took Bear back up to the lake to see if I could find some, this time with scuba gear. But the deep water was still too much for Bear, and I still wasn't good at identifying what a pearl looks like, because they literally just look like rocks. So another very unsuccessful trip. I'm gonna have to figure something else out, because Bear is just no good for this. And there's too many piranhas and dangerous things down there for me to just swim without a tame. I needed something that could swim fast. I spotted a low-level circle, and I decided to go after it. I only needed something to swim fast, so a 15 should be good enough, because they're pretty quick in the water. It took maybe 10 minutes, just enough time to get a saddle, and then I hopped aboard and I continued searching for pearls. I only needed 25 for the Spino saddle, but it was still a struggle just because I have such a hard time spotting them. The Sarco, though, was a huge win. It just allowed me to avoid any of the piranhas and other stuff down in the water. I could be nice and quick, in and out, grab what I needed, and go. Then off to quickly grab more chitin for paste, and eventually I saddle up my Spino. This should make my life so much easier. It's better for getting around, it's much stronger than anything I have, and just a couple minutes into farming meat and hide, I came across another, a level 105 male. I was happy with mine, but getting an imprinted one was really what I was after, so I had to go after this one too so that I can make some babies. This time I just sat on the back of Bear and tanked the hits. I still really don't have enough resources for a trap, and honestly I'm just too lazy. The main worry with this method though is when they torpor run, since they're so fast and the render is so low, they are really easy to lose. I was able to get him knocked out though without too much issue. For this one though, I really wanted to make sure to get that taming efficiency as high as possible. It was not in a really good spot. If anyone else came cruising through the river on their Spino, it's probably going to get hit by something, so I was pretty anxious waiting for it. I did the same as last time though. I waited nearby and I farmed resources until it was ready. I put up a small egg incubation room so that I could be ready to hatch the egg too. Then I went to get my Spino, and fortunately I got that tamed at the highest efficiency possible that I could without kibble. I brought him home to mate, and I made my first Spino egg. I took my Ravager down into the blue zone to do some exploring. I was looking for a good place to get a metal farm set up, somewhere that I could build my forge and a cryo fridge so that I could just come down here and harvest boatloads of metal and then haul it back in big chunks, instead of trying to carry a ton back and smelting it all at home. It kinda sucks though that the Ravager only reduces weight on unrefined metal and not ingots, but I think it will still be more efficient this way. I can always use a high weight crab to carry a ton back if I need to. I scoped out some areas, but I didn't settle on anything just yet. I did, however, get a decent handful of it for now, and then some more wood and thatch farming, but with only metal tools, it's still a pretty tedious task. I really need to figure out a better farming solution very soon, because honestly getting wood is kind of the most annoying thing right now. I took my Spino up to the lake to search for more pearls. I thought that this might be even better than the Sarco because I could just kill everything, but it's still really slow in the water and its turning radius is so obnoxious. Oh, and as soon as you hop off, it floats to the top. So Sarco is still my best pearl option for now. I left her parked on a rock near the lake, so I just hopped on and stuck with her as my pearl gatherer. I needed the pearls though for those electronics. The priority was a cryo fridge and some cryos. If I'm going to be hatching that Spino egg soon, I'm definitely going to need a cryo so that I don't have to stay up for 10 hours feeding the baby. I got the resources ready, but I was going to have to wait until I could find a drop to craft it in. I upgraded the thatch to stone at my base, and I tidied some things up before the end of the day. The egg hatched with a level 158 Spino. I was very pleased. This will be a really nice early game Spino once I imprint it. After some early feedings, I went back up to the lake for more pearls. This time I searched some of the other areas, and I was able to come away with more than I had before. I was starting to get a nice little route in place and becoming familiar with where they're located. Also, a lot better at detecting them. But time away from home has to be limited right now because I have a baby Spino. So I went back for feedings, and then I crafted a generator. Once the baby was stuffed, I loaded up my resources and went to find a drop so that I could craft those cryos. I found one off in the distance, up on a ledge, and I sprinted over there, hoping that someone doesn't take it or it disappears before I can get there. I was able to get my cryo fridges and 2 cryos crafted. That's all I really had the resources for, and that's all I really needed for now, just so that I can cryo my baby. My next objective was to continue finding more advanced resources, like red gems. I needed them for a gas collector, but I didn't have a hazmat suit and they're a bit expensive for me right now. I had to resort to other methods. I was down farming metal in the blue zone and I found myself a roll rat who brought some of that ground with him. So I grabbed those. I had a few in my inventory from something, not sure when I got it, but that, combined with what I just got, was just enough for my gas collector. I had to spend the rest of the day though getting the other resources, and then I went to put it down on my reserved spot that I had saved already with foundations, and then finished the day collecting more Z-seeds. My second Spino was now being incubated. I don't plan on making an army of these or anything, but having backups is really nice, and just having eggs to use for kibble and such only makes sense to constantly breed them. Now that my Z crops were up and producing fruits, I was looking to go after a Ying. I gathered up some resources to make the suggested Ying trap, and I went out to find one. I know, I'm using a trap, but this time a trap was definitely in order since it's a unique taming method. I had no intention of struggling with this one. But you cannot trap this thing, instead you have to trap yourself for protection. It peppers you with its spiky projectiles, and when it fills up to a certain number, it will dive bomb attack you. Then you have to throw the Z-Fruit flashbang to temporarily stun it, and then you can feed it narcotics or biotoxin. Yikes. Once you do that enough times, it will knock out like a normal tame. The Ying I found, however, wanted no parts of that. I ran around taking its spikes and waiting for it to dive bomb, but it never did. Like, it just never did. It got distracted by everything, of course, which is totally normal in Ark. But when I cleared the area and I finally got it secluded, it would not dive at me. Instead, it would just land and then run towards me. It was definitely broken. Why am I not surprised? With less experience in Ark, I would have kept trying, but I've been in this situation before. There's no point in pulling the rest of my hair out over something that just won't work. I decided to give up on it before it made me quit Ark for good. 1 dung beetle is plenty for fertilizer, but since this was my method for getting oil, it was time to get another. I cruised down to blue and I found 2 more dung beetles to tame. Then, one of the many early updates appeared and I was limited to hanging around my base for the rest of the day. No sense in risking being out and about when the server updates in just 15 minutes. Once I was back, I went down to get myself some blue gems. There's a really nice deposit right near the entrance to the blue zone. It's safe. Nameless don't usually spawn near the top, and there's more than enough that I could even carry. This was my starting spot for blue gems, and it continued to be my best spot for farming these pretty much the entire time. I loaded up with as much as I could, and I hauled it home on RAV4. Then I went all the way back down to farm some metal. These are some long trips, and it's very time consuming. I definitely am going to need to find an improved method soon. Getting a base set up down in the blue zone is priority, but I'm still a little ways off from that. I don't even have a crab or an Anky to farm that metal yet. So for now, I continue to take the extra time making those trips up and down on RAV4. I loaded up on pearls to start my day. Then it was my mission to craft the new Zeppelin. I didn't know what it was capable of, but having a flying vehicle on Aberration seemed really helpful. It's pretty expensive, but nothing that I can't farm up fairly quick since poly flows in the rivers here, literally with all the crabs. And one of those crabs I killed had a baby. I claimed it and raced back to get a cryo, hoping it didn't die from piranhas like my first one. I got it out of the water and into a cryo and tossed it out at home to start raising, then back out to find more crabs for their poly. I didn't have a chainsaw yet and probably should have crafted one because it was just my luck that every single crab was dead. I'm pretty sure other people were farming crabs too because there was just literally no crabs. So, no poly. I ran around forever looking, even going up to Fertile Lake to find them, but was empty. If only there was another way to get organic poly. Too bad I didn't know about those flowers that are literally everywhere in the red zone. Instead, I wasted a ton of time trying to get that last bit of poly, and I didn't want to give up because the organic poly expires. So if I had to do this all over, I might run into the same problem later. Anyway, I stayed committed, and I finally found the last couple of crabs that I needed. Then I crafted my Zeppelin, which I could not even use because literally 20 seconds into my first flight, my game crashed. And this was no normal crash. This crash was something that I had already experienced in Ark, except it was happening with wyverns. It was happening 100% of the time too that I would get on a wyvern. So I thought, okay, no wyverns on Aberration, I should be fine. And after almost 30 hours of being here, there was no issues. 20 seconds into that flight, it did the wyvern crash. The crash was back. I was devastated. I honestly felt like I couldn't play. I thought I had to quit Ark right here. Even if it was just the Zeppelin, I didn't want to not be able to use it. I was so excited for it, and just having it sit there like a car in the garage you can't drive, really annoying. That was definitely one of those moments where I was fully ready to quit Ark. I know you've been there, but like always, I moved on because I wasn't finished conquering Aberration, and let's be honest, Ark is just too addictive. So I just accepted the fact that I can't use the Zeppelin. Bummer. My first Spino was already finished and fully imprinted, but my second one I ran into an imprint that I didn't have. Prime fish meat. I don't even know if you can get it on Aberration. Apparently there are saber-toothed salmon, but in all my day, I don't think I've ever had luck getting that from those. So I just assumed that I was out of luck and I couldn't get full imprints. I didn't care too much though because my first Spino was better and 100% imprinted. I had another baby Spino that hatched and was just sitting there because I forgot to turn off my breeding. So I claimed it and I started raising that one too. While on my way down to farm metal, I spotted an alpha crab. These you need for boss fights. And I know just how rare alphas can be, especially when you have other people who need them as well. So I raced back home to grab my Spino, hoping that I'd be able to take it down. I was confident that my imprinted Spino should be able to handle that fight. It was not more than a couple minutes when I got back there, and lo and behold, another person was already fighting it. Like I was just saying, the rarity is made so much worse by people constantly farming them. Anyway, I helped this guy because it didn't look like he was about to be able to take it himself. And I gave him the tribute because I wasn't anywhere near fighting a boss. And while technically I saw it first, he was fighting it first, so fair is fair. But I did get some nice levels for getting the kill. Then down to do what I was originally going to do, farm some metal. One of the things I love about the Ravagers is that I can just use the pick off the bat. Can be a bit safer while farming in these dangerous areas. The only problem is you can't see what's around you. I definitely heard it, a Megalosaurus coming in hot, and I started running immediately, but it was already way too close, and it annihilated my Rav4. I was loaded up with metal too, so I couldn't outrun it. I had to bring my Spino back down to safely recover all my stuff, but a massively wasted metal trip. And now I'm without a Ravager again. So back to the beginnings. I went off to find another one. At this point, it's pretty irreplaceable for me, and I need so much metal now that I can't really move forward without one. Sadly, I lost Fred as well. So I had to replace him with a new Bulldog. Then after a couple more struggles of getting a Ravager, I got another. But it was just a low level 35. I swear these Ravagers are the bane of my existence. I got him tamed, then did some resource farming the rest of the day and claimed a little more land. I saw some people talking about pillar trolls in the chat, which is baffling considering this is a temporary server. I mean, seriously, who has time for that? But I didn't want my remaining 2 months here to be annoyed by a troll, so I put up some thatch foundations to secure my land. Next on the agenda was my hazmat suit. I started farming the crystal and poly and all the things I needed for it, and I was able to get one full suit crafted. Those rock drake eggs were definitely calling my name. The time is coming soon. With all these babies and dinos now, I was definitely in need of some more cryos since I still had just the 2. I kept an eye out for drops, but I wasn't seeing them that much. I finally saw one though on a metal run, and I ran back out quickly to craft before someone else came and grabbed the loot. Then my Carquinos was ready for its final imprint. I really didn't think I'd be able to get full imprints on this because I got it as a baby and it was already at 30%, but they raised pretty slow, and with 2 times I had the 70% imprints. So I was able to get that last one in with some time to spare. I was pretty happy about that. It was also time to get my metal situation improved. Back down to blue, I finally found myself an Anky. I found one I liked, cleared the area with my Spino, and I just used my Spino and let him tank the hits while I tranked it. Either way though, this thing's not like the Ravager for me, so I don't need 8 tries at it. I got it knocked and then I just left it there to tame. I couldn't enclose it because it was too close to enemy bases nearby, but I don't think I really needed to anyways. Worst case scenario, it dies, and I find another, so what? They're pretty much everywhere and super easy to tame. But actually, I ended up taking a break and logging off, because berry taming these, even on 2 times, takes quite a bit of time. I came back and it was nearly done, so I just went down to wait next to it. Then it was time to go after some crystal, something I sorely needed. Farming this with a pick is brutal from these gem nodes. You really don't get much at all, and I don't have any idea where to get regular crystal from. But an Anky on the gems yields a pretty reasonable amount, and that included crafting a ramp to access more of it because there were only 3 nodes within decent distance from my base. I was originally excited about using a lot of the new Bob's Tall Tale stuff, but after that Zeppelin experience, I was a little turned off and annoyed. A lot of it's late game anyways, I couldn't really craft much of it yet, but now that some time had passed, I was excited to try some of it out again. Mostly it's because I learned about the gene scanner and what it can do. One of my most wanted and desired things to have come to Ark was a better way to find the dinos. When I heard the gene scanner doubles as a dino locator, I dropped everything and started working toward crafting that. The only thing I needed was black pearls, but I hadn't even been down into the red zone yet, and I didn't even know where to get them at this point, to be honest. I was a little scared to go down there, but I only needed 8. I had 2 already, and I figured I must have gotten those from trilobites since I'm constantly eating everything in the river. So I went up to the lake to try and farm some of them. I found a really good spot actually where I could just walk around with my Spino, and it didn't take more than like 3 minutes to get what I needed. I expected to be there all day, but I was so happy that I got them so quickly. I crafted my gene scanner and then I tested it out. The first useful thing about it though is being able to detect traits. I gotta say, I'm absolutely in love with the fact that they added these. To me, breeding always got stale after a while. It's just endlessly trying to get higher and higher stats on the same dino. But now it adds more variety and gives more long-term breeding goals. Not to mention, some of these traits seem pretty freaking amazing. Like a 15% reduction on really heavy items like black pearls from exotic bearing, which my Ravager has. That's pretty freaking cool. I checked some of the other dino traits and then I used the locator to find another Cosmo. I was still using chitin to tame them because I hadn't yet learned they could eat Z-seeds. So I did it the long way, but that's why I sought out this low level 20. Since mine died right away last time, I never really got to learn how to properly use one. If I had though, I would have went back and tamed one immediately after mine died. Because oh my god, they are literally just became my most favorite creature in Ark of all time. Why? Because their movement. They are just so fun to use. I could literally just swing around all day and have a ton of fun doing it. And then there's the secret weapon, but we'll get to that. The next day, you better believe I went right back after more Cosmos. I didn't have that daunting task of finding one thanks to my gene scanner, and I learned finally that I can use Z-seeds to tame them. Last time it was frustrating with chitin because after a while the taming meter starts to drop. So not only does it take forever, but you have to be perfect or it won't get done in time. The Z-seeds made this so much easier. When I found the 135, instead of shying away from it, I got hyped to get myself a nice high level. I started the process and the first Z gave it 48%. What a relief. This should be a pretty easy tame now. I had a couple interferences with nearby wild dinos and letting it detect me, but I just needed to let its meter drop back to 0 while I grabbed a few more seeds. Nothing in the wild actually aggroes to these things, so I knew it should stay alive. I made my way back to it with my scanner and started the process. And not much later, I had myself a level 202 Cosmo. Which is important. The number of swings you get is solely dependent on level. So it doesn't matter what stats as long as a high level is good. And 200 is a great starting point with 43 swing ammo. That can also be leveled up. Next on the list was an anglerfish. I went down into blue and tracked a low level angler that I could use for gathering pearls. My Sarco had done its job, but I was ready to really start boosting my pearl collection. And the anglerfish is the only way. For these, low level are actually preferred. They're kind of tanky and they wake up quick, so low level are much easier to tame. And they don't really need high weight or stamina. You just need something to hang on to while you eat some pearls. So I saw it a low level, and I pretty much just hung out nearby while waiting. I cryoed him when he was done and then headed home. I put down some crops to start my plants so that I can get kibble made and other consumables, and I continue the day with my daily farming routines. My Carcanos had finally finished raising, so I crafted a saddle for it. I've never farmed with a Carcanos before, probably because I never truly played on Aberration. I always just came over here for things and then went back to my other maps, but I never actually lived here long term. I didn't even get to the metal farming with 2 Yankees yet, but I was already thoroughly impressed. Kind of mad at myself for not having used this method before. Afterwards, I went out to find another Cosmo. Such an easy process now with my scanner and actually using the right food. And then did a little breeding with all the Cosmos I've tamed so far. Even though it was easy to find and tame these things, it only made sense to breed them too. I was looking to get as many as possible because I'm sure to lose them, because I always get my shoulder pets killed. And then it was time to head back up to the lake. Now that I had my anglerfish, I needed to get my first cryo fridge set up so that I could toss him out. There's no way I was going to leave my low-level fish just chilling up in the water here. I definitely needed to get that guy in a cryo. I set it up, waited for him to unlock, and then tossed him out and went down under. So much easier with an anglerfish to get these. Not only is he quicker than anything down here, but I don't need to worry about finding them. I can just bite the entire surface of the floor, and he'll chomp up those pearls. even the ones that are barely visible because they're half in the mesh. On top of that, he gets way more than just grabbing them by hand. The anglerfish is definitely one of the most important tames in all of Ark, but I feel like it doesn't get the cred. I got an okay haul for now. I'm sure I'll have to find a better location if I'm in need of a lot more, because this isn't all that much, but it should be okay for now. Before heading home, I made a quick run through the forest looking for bees, but nothing. Storage was getting out of hand, so I got myself a vault crafted and then did some rearranging and expanding on my base. I went to track down and tame another Doedicurus. Now that I had a crab, I definitely wanted 2 of them. I found one thanks to the magnificent dino locator, and I got it knocked out, no problems. Then the same goes for an Anky. You gotta have 2 of them to maximize that farming capability. But I couldn't find a decent enough level. And as great as the dino locator is, it doesn't help when you can't traverse the land. So I headed back home for now because my Doedicurus needed some narcotics. I did some more farming while I waited, and then I scooped him up when he was done. I spotted a Gigantoraptor out in the wild, and I had my sights on taming one. You need eggs to tame it though, and I didn't have any. So I lined up my Spinos, and I had them pop out what I could. I wasn't sure if these would be enough, so I actually held off for now until I could get some more. I built my breeding room and I started crafting some ACs. I was still very much thinking about those rock trek eggs, but I needed to get the AC set up first anyways. And I ended up hatching a few Cosmo eggs too. And let me tell you, these things are actually a pain to raise. They take longer than you'd expect to reach juvenile stage for such a small dino, and they have such a low weight, they can't hardly hold any meat. So for about 2 hours, you need to baby the crap out of these. These are going to be very annoying until the Maywing, or unless I can get myself a really high level Gigantoraptor. The rest of the day, I just laid in bed and fed my baby Cosmos. Fun. Eventually I had to cryo them because I was getting bored and I wanted to leave my base without worrying. I went up to the forest to have another look for bees. Still no luck though, that's no surprise. I have the worst luck at finding and taming bees. Unfortunately, you cannot use the gene scanner on them either, so I just had to run around and look. And of course, more pearls while I was up there. Pretty routine thing for now. The Gigantoraptor I had my eye on was still there. Such an unusual thing on an official server to see something stay for so long. Either it gets killed by someone, or tamed by someone, or it just despawns. I stared at it for a while, debating if I should tame it though, but I still wasn't confident if I had enough eggs. Instead, I practiced my Cosmo swinging, and it was in this moment when I really got a feel for it. It might not look like much, and well, I definitely still needed practice, let's be honest, but it was the understanding of how to use its mechanics properly. Using that pole in to get momentum on an upswing, or using that right click to control your direction, just for a couple examples. There's a lot of subtleties to it, and if you really understand it, you don't even need a rock trick to get places. After falling even deeper in love with Cosmo, I just had to go out and get more. Then it was time to go after the Gigantoraptor, which was still there. For once, Ark was handing me a gift, and it would be wrong of me to turn it down. So I grabbed my 4 Spino eggs, hoping that would be enough, and I went for it. I made sure to clear the area with my Spino so that there could be no distractions. I put down the egg and went into the nest, but it wanted nothing to do with the egg, and it came straight for me. I was a bit confused at first. I thought I was doing what I was supposed to be, but I realized I forgot the ghillie suit. So a quick run home, then back at it. This time, all went well. I dropped the egg, it went for it, it got in the nest, and I mimicked the baby, and I got about 8% taming. It was working, all right. Now rinse and repeat. I had no idea how long the Spino eggs would last though. I was able to get multiple mimics in before the egg was destroyed. I was getting closer and closer, and I had just a couple to go. But just as I feared, I ran out of eggs. Mostly because I messed up a few mimics, so it took longer than it should have. Had I been perfect or even really just missed like one, I probably could have had it. Or if I would have just brought one more stinking egg. I knew my Spinos were ready to breed again, so I quickly ran home to see if I could get one more. Unfortunately though, when you leave render, the taming resets. I definitely didn't have enough eggs now to restart, so I was pretty upset. I went back out in search of more Cosmos, because they make me happy. And I ended up finding this level 10 Gigantoraptor. I knew I'd have enough eggs for this one for sure. So just for the sake of wanting to feel successful, and because I never tamed one before, I decided to tame it. I cleared the area just like before, and I was able to get the mimics in without any issue. Success! My very first Gigantoraptor. I forgot that these can change your baby's imprints, so even this low level, super useful. Also, it gives you the breeding feathers. So the fact that it's low level didn't even matter. This was a really useful tame, and I'm really happy I have it. The day was finally here to go after my rock drake eggs. Now that I had some practice with the Cosmo, I felt comfortable going in. I suited up and made my way down into the depths. I wasn't about to be picky with my first egg. The goal was just to get something above level 50 that I could use to get back down here to get more of them. The very first egg I came across was a level 80. That was more than good enough for me and was right on the edge, so I could make an easy escape. With my heart racing, I planned out my escape route. I grabbed the egg and I panickingly Cosmo'd my way out of there. Not as smooth as you want it to be, but I did it with no major issues. Once I was clear of the drake's aggro, I just had to get myself all the way back up. It definitely wasn't smooth at all. Like a lot of bumping into walls, struggling to get any upwards momentum, but it sure was safe. A lot safer than going up that path on foot or even on my Spino. Cosmo, once again, proving itself as my most favorite tame. I died because I forgot food and water, but I was already in a safe spot. Then after a very long time trying to retrieve my stuff and getting back home, at the end of the day, I finally made it back with my first rock drake egg. But I still needed more ACs. Before I did that though, I spotted a roll rat baby that I wanted to tame on my way home. I didn't have any honey, so getting an adult wasn't gonna work, but a baby I could get. And I really needed a better way to get wood. After that, I got to work on my ACs. I had to get some more metal for them. While down toward the blue, I ran into a suitable Anky, so I stopped and knocked him out quickly. I had most of what I needed, and I just needed to wait for some metal to cook. And while waiting for my Anky, that's pretty much all I did. I farmed more metal. By the time the Anky was tamed, I had all the ACs that I needed. I got them set up, and I dropped my rock drake egg. Now, just 3 days until it's ready to hatch. But why wait for just one? I went back into the depths to try my hand at some higher levels. I got down there and I spotted 3 eggs in one nest. Very odd. This is usually a sign that somebody else was down here and didn't like the egg, so they just decided to drop them. But hey, I'll take it. Gladly. More eggs for me. The 115 would be solid and 295s? Well, that's better than the 80 that I just got last time. Talk about a nice little surprise. I grabbed my 3 eggs and I didn't even bother looking for more. I just headed straight out of there. But I didn't make it very far. I'm so incompetent at using the glider, and I flew straight into the river, killing my Cosmo and trapping me down low. I found somewhere safe and I ended myself so that I could get back and properly get my eggs. This is exactly why I have spare Cosmos, because deaths were inevitable. I got my stuff and I made my way back up. This time, a little bit easier. I was definitely getting the hang of this whole upswinging thing. My first egg already hatched and I was raising, and I tossed down the new 3. And since I lost the Cosmo, I went out to see if I could replace it. The roll rat was taking way too long to raise. I ended up crafting a chainsaw to make wood gathering a lot easier. I completely forgot how effective these things are. And I literally don't even need a roll rat now, especially because you can just chainsaw off the back of your Ravager, which is super effective. I wanted to get my metal base set up down in Blue Zone, and I needed a bunch of stone structures and a lot of wood for that, so the chainsaw was absolutely necessary. I went down in search of a good location for my metal base. I ended up settling in this little corner. I put down my pillars so I could claim my land and come back later with all the stuff that I needed. My rock drake eggs were just about to hatch. I got triplets from one of the 95 eggs, which was nice because I need as many females as I can get to make eggs for kibble. And then back to some routine things. More pearls, checking for bees, which I still couldn't find. I had some imprints to do on the babies, and farming things near my base. I was slowly working towards getting my chemistry bench. I got all that I needed except the poly, and once again when I went out to look for it, it was a total struggle. Other people probably doing the same thing. It took a really long time to get what I needed, because I still didn't know about those polyflowers. But I got what I needed eventually in the bottom of Fertile Lake. And and I got my chem bench crafted and put down. Of course, it was literally right after this that I learned about those polyflowers, and I just had to see for myself. Apparently a bear is the best method, but there's no way I'm getting a bear down there without getting a cryo fridge set up first. So I tried by hand, or actually by a sickle. And I tell you, you definitely do not need to worry about hauling a bear down there, because the sickle will fill you up in seconds and you don't have to worry about losing a bear or any other tame. Just Cosmo your way out, or once you have a Drake, just use that. But I truly couldn't believe how easy it was to get poly. I used to be like every other noob and think chainsaws and crabs were the best, but nah man, nah. Now that my poly game was locked down, I had to get the metal situation solved. I went down to my claimed area with some foundations and some forges. I was still very metal broke, so getting an indie forge was out of the question for now. I got the forges and cryo fridges set up to do some crab and anky farming for the first time. Glorious, glorious metal. I finally understood why people used to come here exclusively for metal, even when playing on maps like Ragnarok, which also has good metal reserves. But truly, nothing compares to this. Metal rocks literally every which way you turn. It's amazing. I gathered a good bit of metal, then went home to tend to my babies and do some stone gathering. The 2 Ankies I had were male and female, so I bred them, mostly just to have a backup Anky. I wasn't trying to get good stats on it or anything. I was trying to get a cliff platform put down in the blue, but there was this weird issue where it was too close to enemy bases, even though it definitely wasn't. So I left stuff on the ground for now, and plan to build something later, but I'll need to get back to crafting before I do. I went out on a hunt for another Cosmo. This is becoming a daily routine. I'm building up a nice little collection of these. At the end of the day, I had to re-up on nameless venom for my drakes. The drakes were coming along slowly, and I was okay with the levels, but there was still a lot of room to improve, so I decided to head back down to see if I could get something a little higher leveled. First egg I dropped in on was a level 5. I didn't even bother. I'm not ready to make kibble yet, so there was no need to draw attention of the drakes for this crappy egg. I moved on, but still got swarmed. I struggled to get my way out of there, barely making out with my life, but the Haz suit was destroyed, so I was forced to off myself and then come back. Time consuming and annoying, but nothing was lost. I went back into the nesting grounds, staying up as high and safe as I can, until I made a glitchy mistake and I hit the ground. I thought about just cutting my losses, but I pushed on, and I found myself another crappy egg. With no health left, I ended up having to call it quits. Was a pretty big waste of time, but I guess that's what you get sometimes. Back home, I ran into another alpha crab. No other survivors around on this one, so this one was all mine. I put my Spino to the test. It was only a level 15, so I ended up being an easy kill, and I collected my first alpha crab claw. I'm still in need of a better way to get my metal from my forges up to my main base. For now, I'm just hauling small bits with my Ravager, which, as you can imagine, is very time consuming. But even worse, it's dangerous. I went down to load up, and I was blindsided by another Megalosaurus. I didn't bring any weapons with me because I was trying to be as light as possible to carry all this metal back up. So, RIP Reverend Lovejoy. I was once again without a Ravager and a bulldog. Now getting metal up top was really gonna be a pain. But first things first, I quickly got another bulldog, then off to find another Ravager. I guess it's not just me. Megalos really like the taste of Ravagers. This poor person was getting eaten right in front of me. I tried to save them, but didn't get there in time. Sorry, but just up the ways I found another Ravager. Finally, I got one without much of a struggle. It's about time after 18 freaking attempts. It was a level 82, so a fairly solid one to use, and I didn't really do much while it was taming. I just waited for it, because I was desperately in need of more metal, and kind of needed this thing to continue progressing. Mostly because I didn't think of the other methods that I could use to haul metal back, but oh well. Then, once it finished, I went back down to the blue zone, this time with my bodyguard, Liz, and I started putting down some structures. I wanted to be off the ground for that exact reason of getting blindsided. But since I couldn't do the cliff platform, I went with some ceilings raised up by pillars. I got a bed and most of it set up before heading home to continue another day. I finished off my base and I continued to farm metal. I still needed that indie forge, but I was happy with the setup I had going. But that was my next focus. I pretty much needed everything except the oil, so it was going to take some time farming, but I didn't want to have to haul all that metal up, so I brought a Fabricator down to my metal base. I got the metal first because that had to cook, and Oh my god, I forgot how long it takes to cook this much metal in a regular forge. Whew. I thought this would be like a day-long thing in-game, but it's going to be more like a 2-day-long thing in real life. So I gathered everything else I needed and I had no choice but to wait. I did more casual farming near my base while waiting, stocking up on those standard resources. I re-upped on my cryopods as well, and I prepped some shrinking equipment in hopes of going out to get more tames. I was getting super impatient though. I was so close and I didn't want to wait anymore. I had some metal at my main base and I ended up just hauling that all the way down so that I could hurry up and craft the indie forge. And I got it. So I set it up and then I started filling it up. I spotted another Gigantoraptor in the wild with a baby that was a low level and really cool colors that I wanted. The level was important because you can only steal a baby Gigantoraptor if its level is lower than the one you have. And since mine is such a low level, there's not a lot of options for me. But I wanted to test this baby snatcher's ability, so I hopped on mine. Killed the parent, and I stole the baby Gigantoraptor and carried it home in my saddle. It's been a couple days since I went after a Cosmo, so I was getting the itch. I found a really good level 130 female, a great one to breed with. I made a trip to Fertile Lake to gather more pearls. What should have been a quick trip turned into a disaster. I got excited and I saw a crab with a baby. I was looking to get another one, so I scoped it out with my spyglass, but that 2-second period was just enough time to get swarmed by these piranha, and with just enough lag to keep me locked in place. They blocked me in and I couldn't move. This was the downfall to having a low-level anglerfish. They're faster than everything, but if you stop moving for a second, you can get swarmed. And this one was on me. I had a decent collection of pearls, but like I said, these things are so essential. So immediately I went back to where I got this one and I attempted to get another. But this was not as quick and easy as last time. I struggled to get a decent level 1. I ended up having to settle for another super low level, just a level 10. But I was getting annoyed and I really needed to move on. Getting Drake eggs with Cosmo turned out to be pretty easy. So I thought to myself, why not use him on the surface? Reapers can't fly, so it should be safer, right? I mustered the courage and I made my way toward the surface entrance. I had just a regular suit of flak, a glider suit, and a Cosmo with 37 swings. I was on the hunt for some drops. I walked out onto the surface, got myself some high ground, and I glided my way safely above the surface looking for those sweet, sweet loot drops. It was pretty terrifying, not gonna lie, but I knew I had Cosmo to get me out of trouble. If I ever touched the ground, I just had to make sure to have an escape route. Look up, shoot your web, and get the F out. When I found my first drop, it was yellow and I got excited. I made the approach with the glider, landed, and I grabbed my loot. The Reaper was slow to rise out of the ground and really had no chance of getting me, but I'd be lying if I said my heart wasn't beating through my chest. I got an amazing flak helmet from it too, so I was pretty hyped about that. I kept searching. Seconds later, that glorious red beam dropped from the sky. I waited anxiously for this, assuming there'd be another survivor right there ready to fight for it. But this isn't like other maps. People aren't just hanging out on the surface, so hopefully I'll be in the clear and not have to fight over drops. Something that gets really annoying on other maps. I dropped down and I grabbed my loot and made a very close call escape. Yeah, that was way too close for comfort. It didn't help that there was 400 ping on the server. That's why I'm bouncing all over the place. But after that, it gave me a lot of confidence. Knowing that my basic flak, I could still take one hit from a Reaper and not die, that should give me enough time to get out of there with Cosmo, like I just did. So my nerves calmed down quite a bit, and I started getting excited about going out to get that loot. even without a rock drake. But I didn't have any more armor, so I had to head home for now. I had some babies to take care of, but I fixed up my armor, and then I headed right back out. That loot was too good from just the 2 drops, and I was already addicted to getting more of that good. The first drop I hit on round 2, a max level Ying saddle. Exactly the type of loot I was looking for. On the next drop, I learned another lesson. Don't let the Reaper be above ground before you land. After another metal farming session, I was starting to look into better ways to get the metal back. My crab is my highest weight tame, and since we're dealing with metal ingots, which don't get weight reduction, this was really my best option. I loaded up on as much as I could, which wasn't very much. This crab was only a level 80 when I got it, so nothing spectacular. The jump on the crab, though, actually makes this not such a painful trip. Probably takes 2 to 3 minutes for me to get back, which is totally reasonable. But still, I couldn't carry all that much, so I need to either get a better crab or figure a faster solution out in the future. For now, I used this method. My rock drakes were still raising, but they were getting close. I felt it was a good time to head back in and see if I could find some better ones. The best I could find was a 130, and I was content. Still better than what I had, so I grabbed it and I ran. But the drake pit was pretty empty. Other people must have been down here recently, so I had a pretty easy and safe exit, just the way I like it. I also picked up a couple black pearls when I was down there. I had recently learned where to get them, and I didn't realize it was that easy. Other maps, you always have to farm things, like killing alphas or tusos or something, but I love that they're just sitting down there for you to grab. I really missed having easy black pearls in Ark. I crafted 3 sets of flak and made my way back to the surface. I was still learning about the day-night cycle. I didn't know exactly when it was safe, so I stood there for a while to test it out. I wanted to see exactly what time it made the transition so I knew for future reference. It changes each time in transition from night length period, and I searched everywhere for an answer, but no one had a definitive answer for ASA because it's slightly different than ASC, so the only way was to test it out myself. I went out when it transitioned from 10% night to 90% night so that I should be safe to spend a lot of time out here. I flew around for a little before seeing the first drop, and there was another glorious red one. I swung my way over and waited up high for it to hit the ground. 2 max fast solo Suka saddles. That is pretty funny. I don't intend on getting a Faso, but this will make good grinder loot at least. I kept up with the loot farming for a while, and I got much better at doing it smoothly. Every time I loaded up, I swung back out to my Spino and I dropped off my loot, then I came back out for more, until daylight was upon me. But in my panic to escape before the sun came up, I made an error and I dropped out of the sky and took that fall damage. I had to wait until the next night to get my stuff back. Lucky for me, it's 90% night right now though, so I didn't have to wait all that long. The bag only lasts 30 minutes though, so on any other day-night cycle, I definitely would have lost my stuff. I grabbed my bag and my Cosmo, who was thankfully still alive. I'm surprised they don't burn to death on the surface, but I'm glad they don't. And since the new night just started, I kept farming loot. I took that time to get myself some element ore as well. I wasn't quite ready for element, but I figured it'd be a good time to get ahead of it. And after a whole day of surface dwelling, I came away with some pretty solid stuff. Some good saddles, some structures and good grindables, and even some cooked prime fish meat for those imprints, which I couldn't get before. But I was mostly pleased with how comfortable I was with the loot farming. These drops seem pretty OP, so being able to farm them without having a panic attack or sacrificing a drake every time I go out there is gonna be a huge win. Don't get me wrong, it's still scary, but nothing like when you get pinned down on a drake. My rock drakes were getting close to being raised up. I needed to get some saddles, so I suited up and I went down into the red zone to find some red gems, which you need for the rock drake saddle. I found a safe enough area, dropped in, just got a few crystal, and popped out nice and quick. Then I saddled it up and I took her for a test drive. It has been a long time since I've been on a drake. I definitely had some practice to do, that's for sure. So I flew around for a while because I really missed having drakes in Ark. Some of my other drakes were finished now too, so I could start breeding them. I was only looking for kibble at this point. These weren't really high enough for me to want to actually breed for stats. Then I flew out toward the surface entrance and I looked for a spot to set up a forward operating base. I wanted to be able to bed teleport over here and quickly get out to get loot. So having a generator and a cryo fridge here with some storage and a bed is what I was looking to set up. It was nighttime again and I was already addicted to getting loot. So I took Bill, my firstborn, and tested him out on the surface. What's nice about Drakes out here is that getting from drop to drop is a little faster than using Cosmo. But what's not nice about Drakes out here is this. Yeah, I mean, I tried climbing. I don't know if you can't climb on these metal obelisks, but it just didn't work. And I couldn't get out of there, pinned down by 2. RIP my first Drake. So that is the last time I will be going out on the surface with a Drake. The Cosmo was just so much easier. I hadn't even learned about the Cosmo's secret ability yet either, but I'll get there soon. I moved my fob forward and into the cave. The ground was pillared, but I was able to find a spot up high where I can put my stuff. Once I got it set up, it was nighttime again, so I headed back out with Cosmo. This time I parked my Ravager right on the edge, so it's easier to unload all my loot each time. I got hit, and I had to go pantsless, and I was gonna go home, but I'm really glad that I didn't, because in the next drop that I had a 124 Basilisk saddle, max level. Now that Basilisks are breedable, man, if I can get an imprinted one with this saddle, this thing will be an absolute tank. I continued to be shocked at the insane quality of loot. This was better than any loot drops that I can ever remember on any Ark. It was crazy, and I was absolutely loving it. Because I lost all my other loot from Decay on previous maps, so I was starting all the way over in my greater quest to solo all the Arks. And just before the end of the day, my 130 Drake hatched. I had another routine day of farming resources before heading back out to the surface. Loot farming wasn't just an addiction and really fun, but I actually really needed some things. I intended on using a Megalosaurus in the boss fights, so getting a good saddle BP for that was a must. Also, a good shotgun, good long neck, good armor, all stuff I actually needed for Aberration I was definitely looking for, and it didn't take long to get a Megalosaurus saddle. Not a BP, but getting a max saddle already after barely farming loot was a really good sign. Once again, I stayed out there until the sun came up to get every last drop that I could. And what an incredible haul that I got. My quality loot was already starting to pile up. I got back to basics because I had some babies to raise. I hadn't been raising my Anky, so I started raising that. Then I hatched some new Cosmos. I took a couple days to expand on my base so that I could just stay near my babies. While farming thatch, I spotted another Gigantoraptor that was low enough level for me to steal. I made a quick detour and I snagged it up quickly. I wanted multiple of these so that I can start collecting their feathers. Another really awesome ability with these is the feathers that you can pluck, which give you an increased chance at getting the better stat from breeding parents. I got the other one out from before and I started raising both of them. When night came, I decided to brave the surface once again with my Drake. My thought process was it would be easier to farm ore this way. Since I can't carry all that much on me, I can just load up on my Drake. But of course, while out there, I just had to get some drops. Fortunately though, I had some success doing it this way. More awesome loot like this max Ravager saddle, a sickle, which will be great for getting poly, but honestly, it's way more sketchy on a Drake. Getting off your Drake, getting the loot, and then getting out of there safely is a longer process than with just the Cosmo. So I'm just going to be sticking to Cosmo out here because I'm not okay with losing another Drake, and my heart was beating through my chest that whole time. I finally got myself into the element game. I put some batteries in the terminal near my base earlier, but they were already stolen. Thieves. So I figured my best bet was to just do surface runs. I grabbed some batteries and went up at night. It was nice to see someone had already had some batteries in the first terminal. I loaded it up with the gems and the gas and crafted my first bit of element. My plan was to eventually get all these terminals on the surface filled with batteries. The surface ones recharge faster, so my plan was to just go from terminal to terminal, up here getting as much element as I could each night. I made my way to the second terminal, I dropped off my batteries here, and I waited for them to charge. The sun was coming up, so I only got a chance to craft 2, but now I had a good strategy, I felt like, for getting elements. And I was looking to craft a replicator soon, which takes 100, so a good strategy is definitely what I'm going to need. After more loot farming, I continued gathering more of the resources that I needed for element: red, blue, and green gems, gas, and ore. I had a brand spanking new top tier pick from the drops, so it made gathering those gems nice and quick. Then back out to the surface for more element crafting. I was pretty committed at this point to getting my 100 element to get a replicator. I didn't just use the surface either. There were some charge stations too near the exit that already had batteries in them, which was really convenient and helped make this process quicker. But these are more active. Like I said, I already had some steal my batteries, and when I got home I had someone else crafting element at the one near my base. And once you use it, it goes on like a 15 to 30 minute reset. Not sure how long exactly, but it's a long time. Definitely can't just stand around and wait at one. So surface is probably still my best option. The next few days I was 100% focused on getting a replicator. Constant metal farming and trips up from the blue zone with my crab. I filled most of the surface terminals with batteries and a few other around the map, and I had a nice route going from terminal to collect my 100 element. I had to make multiple trips down to the river to collect black pearls. For poly, I couldn't just use organic because I was crafting in a drop, and there are only 50 slots, which means you have to partially use crafted poly because they stack to 100, and organic poly only stacks to 20, so there's not enough slots. I crafted what I needed for hard poly, and I quickly farmed the organic as the very last thing. But the real challenge to all this was finding a place to craft it. My options were a drop or the surface, but hauling all that metal anywhere is a major issue. I have one crab with 2k weight. That's not enough for even half of the metal. Drops only last 10 minutes, so even if I spotted one, it would be a race to get there, doing it in multiple trips. But the surface seemed way too impossible. With all those reapers, no way. So I was kind of forced into using a loot drop. I boosted the weight on all my drakes and then I loaded them up with all the resources. They weren't very high level, so the weight wasn't great. It took 5 of them. I lined them up at the edge of my unfinished base in preparation for a drop. Then I took Cosmo up and went to search the usual spots. Not 60 seconds later, I spotted one right in front of my base. It was perfect. It was literally right there. It could not be closer. I didn't even think for a second. That was it. That was the one. It spawned in front of my eyes. I knew I had the full length of time to be able to get it. I raced back to my base and I started the process. RIP to all those resources. I didn't care much about any of it except the element. All that hard work down the toilet. A lot can be said about what went wrong here. I could blame the terrible ping and lag that made climbing with the Drake nearly impossible. I could blame not being able to access the drop quick enough with these stupid rocks in the way. But I mostly blame my stupid decision to use a drop in the first place. What was I thinking? This was exactly what I feared, and my fears came to be. At the very least, I should have put the element in last, just in case this happened. But I was full-fledged panic mode. I was just trying to do this as quick as possible. I was not thinking. My heart was racing, and probably I was dripping in sweat too. Full-fledged panic. Not thinking clearly. Without a way to carry all those resources, doing it in a drop was a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. A total rookie mistake on my part, and I was devastated. I didn't really know what to do next. I was so committed to that replicator. I felt so defeated after that. I couldn't move forward without one, even though I didn't actually need it. I just really, really, really wanted it. So I reluctantly started collecting all those resources again. And after about 7 days, that's 7 hours in real life, I finally had my resources again. This time there was only one choice. It was the surface. Fortunately though, I learned about Cosmo's secret ability. When you fire his charged webs at a Reaper, they run away in the other direction. It works flawlessly as a Reaper repellent, which makes the surface even safer and makes Cosmo, once again, my favorite tame in all of Ark. But now that I could use that, it certainly gave me a lot more confidence in going up to the surface to get this done. I lined my drakes up near the entrance and I waited for the sun to go down. So thanks to Cosmo's secret ability, the Reaper shouldn't be too much of an issue, and since this ob isn't going anywhere, I can take as much time as I need and I can be patient in doing it right. But I had a new problem. Ark was being Ark again. Every time I flew one of my drakes out, I could not access the terminal. Super annoying. The only way to do it was to log out and log back in. That means all 5 drakes. Each time I have to fly it over, clear the area of Reapers and Nameless, and then log out and back in. I started this during the 50-50 day-night cycle, thinking that I could get it done in one night. But it took so long, it transitioned to the 90-10, the 10% night cycle. So I had to sit there and wait for multiple day cycles to go by and race out there with my last couple drakes during that really short 10% night cycle period. I did a whole lot of nothing in between except waiting around and farming resources. This time, just in case another person decided to steal my stuff, I waited to put the element in until the very end. And when I finally made that last trip out there with my last drake, I was so relieved. This was one of the most frustrating processes I've ever experienced in Ark. It was a total nightmare. That was like 15 hours of work for something that I don't actually need. The only reason I wanted it so bad was because this playthrough was part of my larger quest to solo all of the Ark. So eventually I would need it, but for this 100 days, all it'll bring me is some faster crafting and dedicated storage. At least that's what I wanted it for here on app. Oh yeah, and it's getting close to that 100 day mark. This might as well have been called 100 days to craft a replicator, or 100 days of farming loot, because that's all I got done in these 100 hours. But this was never meant to be a race to the finish line. In fact, I wasn't even originally going to turn this into a 100 days video. So even though I plan on defeating Rockwell, still there's no rush. After getting a replicator, I fell into a nice little routine, trying to forget all that happened and just enjoy Ark once again. And my favorite thing to do is farm loot. So I did just that. I had only been on the green ob surface. I checked out the red one and found it to be much better. It's bigger and there's a lot more loot, so I started spending a lot more time on this surface. And I mean a lot. Very much became obsessed with farming loot, especially because I rarely had to contest with other people. Everyone is scared of the surface, and I love that. And then I got into better storage. I wanted the replicator for those Daddy boxes, but that's not the only storage I discovered. I didn't even know they added these linked storage boxes, and oh boy, how I really wish I had crafted these sooner. All that time I was looking for a better way to get my metal from my metal base to my main base, and I was carrying it with a crab or a Ravager? What was I thinking? This was completely a game changer, and I'm a little disappointed in myself for waiting so long to craft one. After passing the 100-day threshold, my pace of play really slowed down. There was a lot of relaxed living. It gave me a chance to experience all the things I wanted to on Aberration without the pressure of trying to defeat Rockwell by a certain day. For one, it gave me a chance to build my base. Yes, this is a temporary server, but all these structures get to come with me to wherever I choose to transfer them. And tearing down a base really isn't that big of a task. I love to build, and each build is a new concept or idea for me. So every time I build, it adds a new blueprint to my brain that I can use in future projects. But what was new for me this time was the custom cosmetics. Another thing I long desired in Ark, a way to add more customization to our buildings. The stone, wood, and metal facades have been way too overused, so getting a chance to build with brick or marble or glass that isn't a greenhouse consumed a ton of my time, and I was loving it. Of course, I've already admitted to my addiction to loot, so naturally I spent hours and hours farming it, and I got some insane stuff. When all was said and done, I pretty much had everything I needed. I found good shotguns, good flak pieces, and some really good riot gear, a max sniper, max compound bow, some amazing saddles, and including max Drake saddles and max Megalosaurus. I literally had everything I was searching for, but that didn't stop me from continuing to loot. I didn't need much more element, but since the terminals were filled with batteries and I had a good route in place, I also spent time crafting element whenever I could. Babies were another focus during this period. I wasn't raising a ton, but a few Gigantoraptors, some Cosmos, some Drakes, all things that required some of my time. I also got more efficient at gathering certain resources. Crystal and red gems specifically were tough to get a lot of. After getting a Drake saddle BP, I definitely wanted a way to get more red gems too. So I ended up putting a small crystal farming base in the red zone to make getting those things quicker. I didn't even realize I unlocked the tech leggings when I did the Alpha Manticore on Scorched Earth. I just had to craft those too, to make carrying all this stuff a lot easier. These leggings actually made all that work I went through getting the Replicator worth it. Moving around my base and rearranging is such a process without it, but even more importantly, when it comes time to move all my stuff off server, these are going to be 100% essential. Then, one more major thing I really wanted to experience was all the new stuff added with Bob's Tall Tales. I crafted some of those new items and I tested them out to see what they were all about. Somehow I made it to day 123 without doing a single cave. That's 123 hours of gameplay. Between the 15 hours to craft a replicator and clear and obvious obsession with loot farming, time just flew by after day 100, but I finally had a sudden urge to get back to the original plan, defeat Rockwell. I loaded up with what I needed to take on this cave and I headed toward the entrance. I didn't have much confidence in my Ravager or anything else that fits in there, so I decided just to use a Cosmo and just try to stay off the ground. I brought my best flak gear, which after a lot of loot farming is pretty solid. I could use a better chest piece, but still everything was good quality. Then my best shotgun, which at this point still wasn't great, but I did have a max level assault rifle and a really good sawed-off shotty as well. And then some Freo Curry to give me a speed boost. I had never done any caves on Aberration, so the hardest part for me was learning the route. Getting lost is a death sentence, even in the easiest of caves, especially on foot. I made my approach in and down. The first section is a single path clear of enemies. Nothing to worry about until I got down to the first bottleneck waterfall. I simply scooted past the Carnos and Scorpos and just used Cosmo to hang out in the center where no one could touch me. This is the part where I was just trying to get my bearings, trying to plan my return route home, where I came from, and plan on where I'm supposed to go next. I ran up one path and nope, that was not it. Then down the correct path. I used Cosmo to get myself up over the little narrow passage and stayed off that scary ledge full of baddies with Cosmo. I took another moment in this room to get my bearings again. Then, once I found my way, I popped into the next room and there was the artifact. Way easier than I expected to get here. But I still have to get home. I should have just went the way I came, but I tried following other people's zip lines, and that led me straight into danger. I tried scooting past these baddies, but the lag got me, and I got caught up in the raptor, then swarmed. My armor held up pretty good, but I didn't have a sword or pike. The shotty was just too slow to take down all these enemies quick enough, and RIP. I regrouped and re-geared, but this time I brought my Ascendant compound bow. That way I can pick the enemies off with some range. I made my way back in with the same route, slowly took out all the enemies near my stuff. I got my gear, my artifact, and my Charlotte back. I turned around and went back to where I got the artifact, and this time I took the exact route that I came in. Much smarter, and I made it out safely with my first artifact. Next up was the Artifact of the Shadows, but I wasn't in any rush, especially because this one seemed very, very scary, much harder than the last one, because this one requires me to go underwater, and that's never fun. I did have to prep for it. I knew I'd need better armor and a ton of weapons. I debated going for a baryonyx, but I ended up just planning on using a Cosmo, so I was in need of full preparations before even thinking about attempting it. I got to work, crafting armor, ammo, brews, and everything I needed to prep for my second cave. This server, like a lot of PvE ones, had a tribe who was constantly farming Reaper Queens, and they were generous enough to share those impregnations with everyone. I've held off because I was so focused on other things, but I couldn't resist the temptations anymore. I went down to get myself a free Reaper. This will be my first time ever getting pregnant on Aberration, but I'm no rookie when it comes to this. I myself was one of those Reaper fiends back on Gen 2 with almost daily impregnations, so my hope is that I can go and do this quickly without any issues. When I got there, there wasn't much of a line. I just had to wait for my turn. Then, just like riding a bike, it all came back to me. The first strike, she got me, and just like that, I was pregnant. Easy peasy. Now that I was pregnant, it kind of halted my progress. You can definitely die and still keep the baby, but this is Ark, and there have been times when that does not hold true. So if you really want to be safe, keeping those deaths to a minimum is a good idea, which for me meant holding off on the caves. But I also needed time to level this thing. The Evo event is not running right now, which means it's 1 times. So if I want to get max levels on this, it's going to take a lot of XP grinding. At least the rivers here are filled with Spinos, which for some reason give crazy good XP. The best method is to just kill some Reapers, but I can't really do that yet. Spinos, on the other hand, I'll have no problems with. So I spent a ton of time going up and down the rivers, slaughtering every Spino in my sights. During these days, I also got back to my normal routines, which included element farming. I helped a fellow survivor out with some extra Drake eggs for kibble, and they graciously presented me with a gift. They gave me a really good Bazzy egg. Fantastic, because I didn't really have any intentions on taming one of these. And what's even better is that when they hatched, I got twins from them. So awesome. But oh my god, these are brutal to raise. Go figure. It's not a giga, but it's close. Takes 8 days in real life on 1 times. So they definitely required me to do some upgrades to my base. Eventually, I got my tech generator and tech troughs set up. I had a couple more crabs I wound up finding as babies while killing Spinos, and these guys actually eat a lot of food, so the trough was essentially because of them. On day 136, my Reaper hatched at its highest level possible, so I had started raising him too. I had Cosmo babies to worry about as well. So I was a busy bee in these days, just not busy toward my objective of defeating Rockwell. And speaking of busy bees, somewhere in there I finally found a bee, which I still really needed for kibble, because I was planning on doing some more taming. I still didn't know how I was gonna fight Rockwell. I toyed with the idea of just using Cosmo, a good shotgun, and a glider suit. You can use cactus broth and it works great, but there's none of that here. So if there's another way to avoid the nameless by staying off the ground with Cosmo and a glider suit, it just might work. The other option was using a Megalosaurus, which I did not have yet. So I got the kibble so I could go out and tame some if the strategy of using Cosmo doesn't work. And when I eventually went out to search for one, of course I found a 150 Ravager, something I definitely wasn't looking for, but that's the way it goes. It's hard to pass up 150s, so I detoured and I tamed this real quick. I got all the things I needed and I readied for my cave run in this time as well. And on day 148, it was time to brave the next cave. I loaded up on all my absolute best gear. Max compound bow, 238 harpoon launcher, top tier riot gear, solid flak, ascendant scuba tanks and flippers, near max shotgun, 100 med brews, soups, you name it. I was as ready as I could be. I parked my Drake above the water and I dove on in. The tunnel entrance was empty, an easy start. I took a moment to catch my breath and get my bearings in this first section. I needed to plan out my route and then place a waypoint to find my exit. I Cosmoed my way up and over into the small blue tunnel, which also had no enemies, and no Nameless were spawning there, but I didn't stop to find out. I just sprinted quickly to the next room, when Nameless did in fact start spawning. All these zip lines going every which way had me a little confused, but I Cosmoed up once again to keep myself safe and get my bearings to try and understand where I'm supposed to go. I dropped down to the tunnel and I got ready to go back underwater. I thought it might be best just to swim as fast as possible past everything, but as soon as the Electroforest got me, I knew that was a terrible idea. They come out of the walls, so you can't see them, and their shock slows you down way too much to get past anything else. I was able to make it back out, and I decided this time to try and kite everything instead. My harpoon launcher was an absolute beast. Literally, I've never used one of these things, but being able to one-shot most eels is life-saving. I focused on the eels and the jellies, and I pushed forward. The anglerfish are too strong, and I don't think I have enough ammo, but I can take their hits, so I skirted past them. A baryonyx was blocking the exit. I panicked, and I got a little turned around, but once again, I just popped out of the water. I used Cosmo to get me up high and safe and catch my breath. The Nameless were on the ground, so I just jumped right into the next water section, thinking I could do the same and just get by everything. But an eel got me, and things got hairy. To bring a sword or a pike just for this exact reason, but of course I forgot it. Thanks to my harpoon launcher though, I got out of there alive, and for the first time ever, I had respect for the harpoon launcher. Usually I don't think twice, I just toss those things in the grinder, but that literally just saved my life. So, I had a problem now. My armor was holding up okay, but I had no flippers, and there's more water to get through. So I had no choice but to go back out. I had to swap out all my armor for a new set, but that's exactly why I brought spare. I re-geared and I went back in. This time I was a little more careful in the water sections. I focused on those eels and jellies again, but I did it a lot more slowly. I also brought a sleeping bag and I put it down inside the area where I almost died. Then I pushed through, making sure to get those baryonyx as well because their stun is also devastating. I was surprised to find the artifact in the very next room. I probably could have just pushed through last time, honestly, but I was right here now. I grabbed my goods and I got ready to make my escape. Most stuff was already dead on the way out, but I still had to be careful. I quickly made my exit and I got back to my Drake, who was being attacked by a crab. But his 124 saddle kept him safe. I hopped aboard and off I was with artifact number 2. Now I really had to start thinking about the Rockwell fight. I decided I was indeed going to try to fight with Cosmo, but in the case I failed, I wanted to have some Megalos to try the second time. So it was time to hunt. I went down into blue and the Max Dino icon popped up. You hope and pray when you see that it's what you're looking for. Lo and behold, there it was, a 150 Megalosaurus. The struggle was actually real to tame this thing though. I died a couple times, but I was fully committed. It's because I was trying to use a trap, which I'm just no good at. I stuck to my guns and I did the no trap method. I just tanked some hits on my Drake and shot at it. Of course, there was multiple, which always makes things harder, and this Drake only had a primitive saddle on it. So, R.I.P. Limon. I brought my good saddle along, parked myself up high, and finally started doing it right, which is the safe way. The two were male and female, so even though the male was only a 110, I definitely wanted to get them both so that I could start making eggs right away. I got them both knocked and went back to base to start making kibble. The 110 finished first, I got him and its babies, and then I put my kibble on the 150 and I logged off. It was a new day in real life. I went down to my metal base and I ended up finding another really good one, a 130, right there. So I tamed that one too because it was a female, so it was good to have another breeder. And also, this one had some babies. It turned out, the 150 I tamed was actually the worst of the three that I got. Just my luck. The 110, which was the male, had the best melee, 290, or 287.7 rounded up. The 130 female had 8,000 HP. The 150 had lower than that on both, but it had crazy high stamina, like almost 2,000. These are certainly not the greatest stats, but I was content with them. I really just wanted something that was usable. These wouldn't be good for an alpha fight, but I think they'll be fine for up to beta, especially with max saddles on them. Anyways, I was only planning on gamma for now, and these were really a backup to my Cosmo only method. So I didn't want to spend a ton of time trying to get the absolute best stats when I don't even know if I'm going to be using them. I started breeding the ones I had. The day was here to attempt my final cave. After doing some research, I felt a lot better about this one than the last. Apparently, with a Drake, you can get in and out without really having to deal with many enemies, which is great because this cave has the worst of them. The real challenge, though, is finding your way. I marked the entrance on my map and I headed towards it. Once inside, I had to navigate my way around, trying to avoid the Element River and landing on any surface where I could get swarmed. I took the suggested route, but when it comes to climbing with your Drake, the visibility is so jacked up, it's so easy to get turned around and lost. And that's exactly what happened to me. I could not see, and I totally lost my way. I had to go back to the beginning to get my bearings again, but the whole time I made sure to stay safe on the walls and kept an eye on my stamina. I was able to eventually find the right path without running into any baddies. I tossed on my camo to sneak past the few on this narrow path, and I found the artifact. All I had to do was destroy these fairly weak enemies right near the artifact, which my Drake can handle just fine. I got the artifact, and then I started making my way out. Even with the marker set, I still got lost again. But I had plenty of hazmat protection, so time wasn't really an issue. I just had to make sure not to land on the ground or lose stamina and fall in the river. And with some searching, I was eventually able to find the exit. And that was it. I had all 3 artifacts. I was only planning on Gamma to start, so I was ready. But mentally, I was definitely not ready. There was no rush. I still had lots of things I wanted to do. I was very much still in a casual state. Somewhere in these days, I made the decision to use my Megalosaurus in the Rockwell fight. I really wanted to try the Cosmo only method, but I'll chalk it up to just being too much of a coward. I wanted to be safer and bring all the dinos into the fight for me so that I didn't have to risk doing it multiple times. And it's a really, really good thing that I committed to raising these Megalosaurus earlier, because it turns out the Cosmo only method was patched. They made it so you cannot swing in the boss arena. Huge rip. Now I really only had one choice to do this: Megalosaurus. So in these days, I pretty much only focused on raising an army of Megalos. It's a multi-day process in real life, and I spent little time doing anything else. Most of the time, I would simply log on to feed and imprint the babies. I made quick runs to get backup artifacts in case the first attempt didn't go as planned. And also, I got the saddles crafted. I already had most of them from drops, so this wasn't a ton of work. I began some early preparations for my trip back to the island. I still had bosses to fight there, which meant I needed to do caves. So I got myself a baryonyx so that I could start breeding a good caving dino. And I got some snails for future poly storage and paste production. The only other thing of note that happened in these days was taming this 145 Spino. I was kind of hoping to start breeding some of these, potentially using them for the center boss fights. After 167 hours, I finally mustered the courage to take on Rockwell. I had a lot of hesitation, mostly because this is the way I play Ark. It takes me forever to get one thing done because I get distracted by everything. Did I need to spend 15 hours crafting a replicator? No. Did I need to spend 10 hours farming loot? No. It's not just the procrastination, though. I've been playing Ark long enough to know bad things always happen. So, deep down, I think the real reason I postpone boss fights or hard challenges is because I'm afraid of Ark being Ark and letting me down. But I had to do this eventually. Today was the day. I set up my cryo fridge down as low as I could, at a point where it would be easiest to get my Megalos to drop down. The follow is totally broken in this, so I was going to have to do this one by one. I bred 18 Megalosaurus for this, but because of how much of a nightmare it would be getting them down to the boss terminal, I decided I was only going to bring 6 into the fight. I dropped down with my first one, and I began clearing the area. I was hopeful that after the first, the rest would be a clear path. I took out the drakes nearby, then I dropped down the path. I was hoping to clear the river and then just be able to walk up the path on the other side, right to the boss. I cleared the river, but I ran into my first roadblock. Literally, I could not get up here. There was no path at all. I was stuck. I tried skirting around the edge, but I fell into the river. I was barely in there, but apparently your light pet doesn't even need to touch the water. Once you go in a little, rip. Then the Nameless started spawning, and now I was screwed. There was no way to cryo my Megalosaurus either, because once they take damage, there is a cooldown on when you can cryo. I was stuck. Either I stay here, come back down, and let my Megalosaurus take damage, or I go through the river. Then a Reaper shows up, and I had no choice. I ran right into that river. I didn't take as much damage as I thought I might, but my light pet was already dead. I just pressed on, and I sprinted toward the terminal. I had drakes up my ass, but when I got to the top, I took them out. But the Nameless kept coming. The only option was to find a small window when they weren't attacking, take off my gear, and run so that I could respawn back up top. Even though a Reaper was staring down my Megalosaurus, I left him there hoping he wouldn't die. I spawned back in up top. I was still in radiation zone, so I had to quickly suit up. I lost a bit of health in the process, but I was okay. I had to clear the area of that Reaper, so I grabbed my Drake and my backup light pet, and I went down to the terminal. It was just a level 15, nothing my Drake and Megalo couldn't handle. Once I took it down, I had some reconsidering to do. That did not go as well as planned. Not to mention, it took like 30 minutes to get down there. There's no way I'm getting 6 of them down there, let alone the 18 I originally bred. Each one took a ton of damage too, between the Element River and the gauntlet of Drakes and Nameless. Also, I have to cross that river every time, which means I can't bring a light pet because it'll die. I didn't really have much options though. I could use a drop, but last time I tried using a drop for something, I got completely screwed, and I didn't have a way to get my Megalosaurus to one fast enough anyways. I had to keep going and keep trying. I got the next one down the same path. I parked it away from the Nameless, and this time I had to go all the way back to my main base to get a new light pet. This was already taking a really long time, like over an hour. I was so impatient and so annoyed, and I really just wanted to get this done. So I decided I'm not going to use 6 Megalosaurus, I'm just going to use 3. I was really banking on my really good saddles and good shotguns. I saddled up my 3rd Megalosaurus with all my gear, and I got ready to make that final trip down. Once I made it down to the terminal, I had my 3 Megalosaurus and my light pet, and I was as ready as I was willing to be. I was so fed up and tired of this. I just needed to hurry up and get this done. I opened up the terminal and put those artifacts... Actually, no, I did not, because Ark was being Ark. It was the same issue with when I crafted a replicator on the surface. I could not access the terminal. Okay, it's okay. No big deal, I thought. Last time, it was just a simple relog, and it worked every single time, too. So, I just quickly logged out with no doubt in my mind that it was gonna work now. Sure enough, it did not work. That terminal was locked. I could not access it. There was nothing I could do. I logged in and out multiple times, but nothing. This is exactly why I have anxiety when I play Ark. There's always something. Always. Nothing ever works the way it's supposed to. Whether it's my own fault or the damn game, nothing ever happens smoothly in Ark. I was so disheartened and frustrated and annoyed, and I had every reason to quit Ark for good right There. I grabbed all my stuff and climbed my way back home with my tail between my legs. After like a day in real life to cool off and time to think, I ended up deciding on attempting this from a drop. So, funny story, if you remember, my Zeppelin hard crashed my PC every time I use it. Well, now I had a new PC, so I could use the Zeppelin again. So I thought to myself, let's see if I can actually make it useful. I decided to attempt starting the boss fight from a drop. I loaded up my Megalosaurus on my Zeppelin, and I set off to find myself a drop. It didn't take much time, but I was impatient. When I saw that beam in the sky, I headed towards it. There was actually 2 of them, so I had a good chance to get one. The first one I chose, of course, just 10 left when I got there, so that was out. Then the second one I went to, well, that disappeared also as soon as I got close to it. Great, so more waiting. Eventually, a blue one showed up in the distance, and after so many hours, I was so impatient that I just went to it without thinking. As soon as I got over there, I started taking damage. I was in a spore zone and dying. I kind of started to panic though because it sounded like my Megalosaurus were taking damage, and I really did not want to lose them. Same with my raft. It sounded like it was getting hit. So in my panic, before I died, I quickly tried to move the Zeppelin out of that zone. My health was already too low, so I died, but that was totally expected. But that's not the problem here. When I went back to get my body, this time I was wearing full hazmat just to make sure I didn't take spore damage. It wasn't there. It was stuck inside the Zeppelin. Even the death marker was being moved by the Zeppelin. And apparently this is a known bug. Just it wasn't known about by me because I already had Zeppelin issues and I didn't touch that thing in the past. If you die on the Zeppelin, apparently you can't get your stuff back. I even tried destroying the Zeppelin to see if it was in there, but it was nowhere to be found. I had all my boss stuff on me. Multiple sets of my best armor, good shotguns, pistol, and a ton of ammo, and the 3 artifacts. This was a massive loss. Everything gone. I still had my Megalosaurus, but I didn't even care. I had so many extra of those that I wouldn't have cared if I lost those things. It did matter though that I lost some of my best gear, stuff that I don't have blueprints for to make more of, so it's gone for good. I was so done at this point, so incredibly frustrated. All I wanted to do was quit this damn game. Be done with Ark for good, which to me really means take a day or 2 off until I'm fiending for it again. But I have had a hard time letting go, and my backup artifacts were just staring me down. I couldn't just be done without at least attempting this dang fight, even if that meant on foot. I decided to give it one last go, or rather, one first go. I grabbed my absolute best gear, which I held off on bringing in the first fight because it didn't seem necessary. And now, I wasn't bringing backup sets. I only grabbed 1 set of armor, but it was really, really good. Also, I didn't bring my 298 shotty last time because I didn't have a BP for it. But literally just a day or 2 ago, I got 2 max shotgun BPs in the same drop, which was super crazy. So now I was comfortable bringing my lone pre-crafted max shotty with me. I grabbed 2 Ascended shotties though, and a rifle to shoot the balls. I equipped my strongest Drake with a 124 saddle, and I set out to find a drop. I'm going in this fight with a Drake and a dream, baby. I found that drop, started the fight, and it was on. The first round always goes so well. You don't have many enemies to worry about. I rode around on the back of my Drake, quickly taking down those tentacles. When his heart opened up, I headed on in and I started pumping him full of shotgun shells. Second time around, I started getting quicker at it. It only took 2 shotgun hits with my max, and I was cruising along. The balls were coming at me, but I just kept moving. It's hard to turn around and shoot them on a Drake, so I just tried avoiding them. Third round, things started to get a little crazy. I have to watch for those electrifying tentacles, which will knock you off. Still, not too many nameless or enemies, so I was just patient, taking them down one by one. I wasn't even trying to fight the nameless, I was just trying to do this as quick as possible. Another round down, and I was down to halfway with plenty of time. But the first Reapers started to spawn in. I tried to keep cruising along and just avoiding them at all costs. But in that panic, to keep them at a distance, I made the mistake of walking past a tentacle. And when I did it, it electrified me. No! I had my Cryo out instead of my shotgun on accident, and then I missed a shot. Had I connected, it's possible I could have avoided this. But I lost my bulldog in the process, which made the nameless spawn like crazy. I had to keep going though. I was still close. The heart opened up and there was a Reaper down there. I went invisible on my Drake and I kept my distance, pumping it with shells. I can still do this. It was getting tougher and tougher to avoid the Reapers and the nameless, but I had tons of time and I was just managing it. Those balls started to come hard, but I was more concerned with the Reapers. I didn't pay attention to my armor, only my health, and that was looking good, so I just kept going. I just tried tanking the hits from those balls to get this done as quickly as possible. And when I got to the heart again, I heard one of my armors break, so I just let it go. I just wanted to get this one round done, and then I figured I could recover from there. But with so many balls, and I guess I had more armor damage than I realized, they all came so hard at once, and with that broken armor, it only took a couple to finish me off. RIP! Man, I sat on that death screen for a good 20 minutes thinking about my life choices. Why do I do this to myself? Why do I do this on official servers? In single player or even an unofficial server, these things can be avoided. Boss terminal not working? Okay, an admin can force your way into a boss fight. So why put yourself through this torture? Well, that's kind of the point. Everything is permanent. This is a survival game after all, and in survival, random, unexpected things occur that you have to figure out how to deal with. In single player, it's too hard to resist using commands when something goes wrong, or simply reverting to an old save. You cannot do that no matter what. Whether it's your fault or not, you have to deal with the consequences on official. And there's something special about that to me. Between the Replicator crafting saga and the boss terminal thing, that's enough to make most people quit the game, or at least never play official again. But for some sick, twisted reason, that actually makes me want to come back for more. I just need a couple days to cool off, and I will be back to conquer Rockwell. My greater quest to take down all the bosses of Ark continues, but for now, the Aberration chapter ends here. I'll see you soon, survivors.